Yeah, boy, it's episode 145, Slim?
46.
46! It's episode 146, and this is a Fantasy Football Auctioneer. The Fantasy Football Auctioneer is the official podcast of thefantasyfootballauction.com, the internet's only podcast and website dedicated to fantasy football auctions. You can follow us on Facebook. We are at facebook.com/fantasyfootballauctioneer, or follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We are at Fantasy Auction. We've got a great show for you tonight. Tonight, I'm just giving you the intro because I am live at a live auction right now. Boys, say hi. We're live on the podcast. All right, we are live on a podcast right now. I had to shirk on hosting duty so that I could be an auctioneer at the House of Gillens. Gillens Insurance, proud sponsor of the Fantasy Football Auctioneer podcast. All right, so tonight I know we're going to go over our big auction from the weekend. We took part in a live auction. We had some wings, we had some beers. We also had a few strokes in the golf swings as well. So I'm going to introduce first. He is, I love that he finally is podcasting from his basement, the actual studio, the office. Mr. Blister, how's it going tonight?
Good. Looks like a lot more fun though where you are, bud. So I hope the draft is going well. How many pizza breaks are these guys taking?
Well, it's the end of round 4 pizza just showed up, so let me tell you, it stopped quickly to get some pizza. So.
Right on. You got to have a few pops and a few pizzas when you're having a draft.
It's pretty good. And he can't believe what's happening right now because he thought he had a podcast all organized, and then I jumped in to do the intro. Slim, how's it going tonight?
Shitty.
All right, we're going to recap some of the auction tonight. I'm going to disappear so these guys can run the podcast. I'll tell you right now, Mike Evans was just a steal at $38. We've seen the Seattle defense go for $4, but no one has gone over $9 for a kicker, Blister, so you still win.
Oh, these guys don't know what they're missing out on.
All right, boys, you guys take away the rest of the podcast. Thanks for letting me interrupt.
Good luck, boys.
Hit with the hind!
I was waiting for that.
That was driving me nuts that night because it was right in my ear. And then it started echoing when Blackie started doing it.
I know. I was. I can't even say anything because when we were golfing, I threw out a dick out for Harambe a few times, and I'm sure it sounded quite the same to people that didn't think it was funny. But that's how I felt that night too. I was like, how the references was. But, so we digress. All right, Blister. So, yeah, we'll recap our draft. We'll do a couple quick fantasy buy or sell from the news. You ready?
I'm ready, man.
All right. You're ready, then I'm ready. You guys are ready. Let's cock the hammer. It's time for action. All right, let's hit the first one. And I kind of put this one first because it's the biggest news. Maybe not so much fantasy biggest, but just the severity of the injury biggest. Vikings QB Teddy Bridgewater had a pretty gruesome knee injury. By reports, I guess it was a dislocated knee, ACL complete tear. When I don't know, obviously no one saw the footage or anything. When I hear this, I kind of think of Marcus Lattimore type thing. That's what sticks in my head at least anyway. Obviously, he was looking pretty decent in the preseason. Could be a pretty big blow to Minnesota's offense. As a whole, passing and potentially rushing. So, Blister, let's get your thoughts on this. Buy or sell? You were dropping AP down your RB ranks because the offense will be less effective.
Well, we'll get to that buy or sell part in a little bit. I just throw my condolences, I guess, to Viking fans everywhere. I ran into a guy at the rink who's a huge Vikes fan, and he didn't know about it. And I told him, and it was like I ripped his heart out. It was awful. And got an email from another one who's actually at that draft right there, too. And it just, it was devastating news to Vikes fans. And I mean, I don't blame them. I mean, they did win the division last year, and they were hoping to build on that. And all indications were they're going to let Teddy let him loose a little more and try to get the ball down the field. And it is disappointing. You don't even lose your quarterback in a meaningful game or something. It's just in practice. So that's too bad. And apparently it was pretty gross because guys were vomiting on the field. So I was coming in from work and listening to it all on the radio, and it was for sure. And I don't think, I think Sean Hill can be serviceable. He was when he was back in Detroit and he had to go in and, he put up decent numbers. But I just don't see him being able to be a quarterback for a full 16 games. So I really know, the Vikes are going to have to get somebody else anyways. So they're going to have to look for some more depth, somebody that could still play. Now, as far as buying or selling, moving AP down the board, I'll sell. I'm not going to move him down the board. I think AP is used to, they might come in opposing teams and view AP as stop AP and we'll have the Vikes in a good spot. But you know what? That's been every team's probably game plan for how many years now since AP's been a stud. So come in and try to stop AP. Don't let AP beat you. But, he still gets the job done. So I think that he can stay where he is. I mean, if anything, they're probably going to hand him the ball a little more often now than it might hurt more guys like Diggs and, Charles Johnson, Treadwell, if he ever did show up. Some of these guys, Rudolph might be okay. He might get targeted more too. It's hard to say, but no, keep an AP where he is. What about you, Slim? What do you think?
I'm kind of maybe inclined to drop him a little bit, and the only reason being I have him kind of in a tier. I have him right in my rankings. I got AP as number 5, but right behind him I have Jamal Charles, I have Devontae Freeman, I have Le'Veon Bell, and I have Doug Martin. Minus Charles because, we'll get to it in a little bit.
Yeah.
I could very easily see any one of these guys finishing, ahead of AP, regardless of who was under center for the Vikings. So if you lose this quarterback who, on paper, I guess, is statistics-wise looks fairly comparable, I guess, to Sean Hill. What worries me is just how often can they move the chains without a player like Teddy. To me, that's what he was going to do with the offense, was keep them on the field maybe a little bit longer, get these guys more touches and things of that nature, just because they would be running a few more plays. So I'm inclined to maybe throw guys like Devontae Freeman, Doug Martin. I don't mind Doug Martin. I know some guys are lower on him. I think you probably may be in my camp a little bit where, I think he's a pretty safe RB1 this year. If he stays healthy. So to me, it's reasonable he could finish ahead of AP. So I don't know. Again, it's all going to come down to value. I mean, it's all about what price these guys are all going for at your draft anyway. But if all things are being equal and I'm paying the same price as, Devontae Freeman, I might lean a little bit more towards Devontae Freeman right now. But I mean, like I said, they're all pretty close though.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's not a good thing all around for the Vikes, that's for sure. It's too bad. I mean, especially too, we were going to go down and watch them. I was kind of looking forward to good play, and now that really drives that $300 nosebleed ticket, makes it even taste a little more expensive now. So when you got to watch Sean Hill or who knows who they'll have by middle of October. That's
beautiful stadium. Shitty ticket prices.
Yeah, awful.
Whatever. All right, we'll move to the next one, a little bit near and dear to your heart, maybe here, Blister. So the Cards wide receiver Johnny Brown is uncertain for Week 1. Brown has been suffering from recurring headaches from a concussion. He was diagnosed on July 31st. He returned to practice this week. And it sounds like he's not ready yet to say he's out for Week 1. He's trying to take it day by day, but signs are starting to point to this could be him missing some time still because he hasn't really been out in the field too much. So Blister, buy or sell? At this point, you'd rather have Floyd or Fitz over Smoke at this point.
Yeah, I'd buy that. I'd rather have Fitz, actually. I like Fitz. I mean, he doesn't get the respect or the love when we're drafting as much as Floyd. Floyd is popular and guys are going after him. But, last year Floyd only had 88 targets. And he played 2 games less. but prorate that, and he's probably still I should have done this in my head it's about 6 targets a game. So you give him 12 more targets, he's at 100 targets only, and that's not receptions. He had 61 receptions. 52 receptions. Now, Johnny Brown had 101 targets, but Larry Fitzgerald had 146 targets for 109 receptions. So he had more receptions than if Fitz even had, Floyd even. I'm all screwed up. Larry Fitz had more receptions than Floyd had targets, and he had 9 touchdowns, over 1,200 yards. I like Larry Fitzgerald still. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want him as your number 1 receiver off that offense, although he's still kind of banged up right now too. Johnny Brown, it is a little scary. He's not a big guy. I mean, he's going to take some pretty solid whacks when he's running out there and when he makes a catch, but he's fast. But Jaron Brown actually has had a hell of a camp this year, and he could be a guy that could step in. I'm thinking that if Fitz gets back on the field and they got Floyd, I'm sure they'd run with Jaron, and J.J. Nelson's still going to get a few targets here and there too. And it's not as dear to my heart as it used to be because I had traded Johnny Brown.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Earlier this spring, I sent him to receive another injured player in Tyler Eifert. So, it's not really helping anybody. That's right. So it's not helping me. I might be starting Cameron Braid or Lance Kendricks in the dynasty this year at the first couple of weeks. So after trading ASJ away, foolishness.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at with that.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, I won't get into it, but I'm a Fitz believer too. I love him. I think he's undervalued because people think he's old, and I think he's just a freak. Though age isn't going to set in for him. He takes care of his body, and it doesn't matter yet.
That's right.
All right, we'll move on to the next one then. Jamal Charles, knee behind schedule. Collective gasp. This hurts me because I had him ranked fairly high. I was anticipating him coming back, and he was awesome last year when he was on the field in terms of a points per game average. He was right up there with the top guys. So yeah, the reports are that Chiefs running back Jamal Charles is behind schedule from this knee injury. The Chiefs said during the offseason that barring a setback, Charles would be ready to participate when training camp started. So there has not been a setback, at least that we're ready for. But so far, he still hasn't been ready for the start of camp. So, I mean, does this worry you? I mean, this is, who gets the role? So buy or sell blister, Spencer Ware should be on every zero RBs team's draft plan.
I buy that. I'm starting to think more and more that he could start the first game of the season here with Jamal Charles progressing slower. And I read something else today too, where there's another player, I think a key defensive player that's has been banged up and hasn't been able to practice, but he's a lot further along than Charles. So, it's only 8 days until the regular season starts. They don't play on that night, but it's not that far away. And I don't think if Charles is if they're still just easing him in and he's not ready to go, I think that Spencer Ware could start for you for the start of the year. When Charles comes back, he'll probably take over the starting snaps for a while, but he's injury prone. And a guy like that, if he's not doing a whole lot right now, the next thing you know, he'll probably have a pulled hamstring and miss some more time. So, yeah, I would definitely target Spencer Ware. I'm kind of feeling better about picking him up now in our auction. We'll talk about that later, but he might even be if he's a starter, he'll be starting for me in week 1 or on my flex at least.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he was always a guy to keep on your radar anyway. This is good news if you own him or we're targeting him. Obviously bad news if you own Jamal Charles, but because I mean, even if Charles comes back, he's aging. The longer it took for him to come back, the more likely it was that they would ease him in or something. So I just am getting more worried here, even just about his general usage when he comes back. So I think I might have to start dropping him down slightly a little bit.
I think
maybe
I might
get him for a good steal here too. It's all about value. If you're drafting this weekend, he could be a guy that could finish, as a mid to, fairly high RB1. I don't think he's going to, get in the category of, the David Johnsons and, Zeke Elliott's and maybe the Gurleys and stuff like that. But he could finish still, just right below those guys. But it definitely looks like it's going to be a little bit tougher for him to do than it did a month ago.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go to the last one, and I just want to throw this one in there. Just I don't know, give the tight ends a little bit of love. Kind of go on with the Darius Green saga. But yeah, the Steelers are kind of looking now for Jesse James to take a shot here at this tight end job. So the Steelers, we know they signed with Darius Green in the offseason. He's going to start the season on the PUP list. He hasn't practiced yet at all or anything, so it doesn't really look too good for him playing, obviously, early on. So Blister, buy or sell? We're looking at a tight end one in Jesse James.
Well, I'll sell that. I mean, I remember listening to Dynasty Pods last year, and they never had too many good things to say about Jesse James. And, being a rookie last year, you don't expect too much out of them anyways. I just don't know. I mean, he's got the perfect situation. He's a big guy, like you said. He could be a great red zone target. Ben's always liked his tight end when it was Heath Miller, and it was looking really promising for Ladarius. And I just don't know how much confidence and faith they have in Jesse James there. They brought in Ladarius Green when they had a big, young, supposedly sure-handed tight end who could catch passes. So I'm going to have a hard time believing he could be a tight end 2 even at this point, top 24. I'll be surprised. I definitely don't think he can crack top 20. So I'm not going to buy him as a tight end 1. Still not going to pursue him in any drafts.
Really, that was my next question. I was going to say,
yeah,
whereabouts would you draft him? Because for me, I actually don't mind. I mean, the biggest, most intriguing thing for me with him is his size. He's 6'7". Yeah. When I look at the Steelers, one of the things that to me they miss a lot is a big presence in the red zone, especially now with Martavis Bryant being gone. I mean, Antonio Brown is going to get touchdowns. A lot of his come maybe from a little bit further out. He will still get targeted in the red zone, obviously, but I mean, Big Ben is going to need some other targets here because in the red zone, if a team decides, you know what, we're not going to let Antonio beat us, we're going to try and triple cover him, that might take away him, yet open other areas of the field. So if Eli Rogers and some of these smaller guys can't do anything, this big behemoth could just be 6'7" in the middle of the field, and he might end up kind of catching 12 touchdowns with virtually no yardage and fall ass backwards into it.
Well, it does make sense. I mean, they don't have any big receivers right now, so all the signs that are pointing in his direction, in his favor. I guess I don't have enough confidence yet because I just haven't seen it out of this guy. I'd rather, instead of, I mean, he's not a bad gamble. Let's put it that way because of everything you just said.
That's a gamble, right?
Yeah. You're going to pay $1. Yeah, you're paying $1 for him. There's other guys down there too. Like I like Jordan, or I want to like Jordan Cameron. I mean, all signs point to him being in the Adam Gase offense and the tight, but he freaking dropping the ball. So he'll get surpassed by Deion Sims or somebody. But I think he's been struggling as much. But Virgil Green is the guy, or Vance McDonald, I think probably goes for $1. I mean, those guys. I guess if you're going to grab a couple for $1, you take a shot, and it's easy to drop them, pick up the next man up real easy too.
And that's the thing. You're right there. Okay, so that's it for the news. I didn't want to spend too much time on there. I want to get into kind of our draft breakdown so that we could really help some of these listeners out here that are probably doing their last draft of the off season, or getting at it this weekend. Really kind of give them this last little tidbits and maybe some of our observations and hopefully help them when they go into their draft this weekend. I know some of our buddies up in a little bit north of where we're located are having their big home league draft up in Dryden, so shout out to them. Good luck. I think it's on Friday night, actually. So hopefully they listen and some of this helps them. All right, so Blister, why don't you give us a quick little rundown of how your draft went, what your thoughts were, maybe the entire draft, things that you might have saw, hopes, fears, dreams, whatever else you have here.
Well, it seemed like the money was really flying off the board at the start, and guys weren't scared to spend it. They weren't holding back on anything. And I guess in the end, I made one fatal mistake going into the draft. Like I went in and I had budgeted, and I mean, not just going into the draft, I was working on it for a while, but I had budgeted my starting lineup, like right down to each position. I was willing to spend $7 on a quarterback. My RB1, I think I had around $30. My RB2, same thing, around $30, or hopefully less. And then I was going to spend around 51 on my wide receiver 1, and hopefully 35, and then whatever else I was gonna. If I could save money, I was going to budget about 15 for my wide receiver 3. But if I could save money on any other position, that's where I was going to put it. And I had that budgeted all the way through. So then I get to the draft and totally didn't realize I forgot about the flex position, which in a PPR draft you want a pretty solid flex player. I mean, it's almost like drafting your 4th wide receiver, so you want to have enough money for a decent one. And basically, I mean, it's the same format as every other draft we've had. I don't know how I spaced it out. We had the ESPN one. I've been online to a few. The only difference was we didn't have a kicker, so big deal. That was $1 that would have been budgeted there, and it's not the same as your flex. You're probably hoping to spend 12, 20, $30 on it. Who knows? So, anyways, that was unfortunate. But I got, when going in, I kind of thought if I'm only going to spend a few bucks on a quarterback, I was kind of targeting Eli Manning. I have him in quite a few leagues. And what really drove it home is I did end up getting Odell Beckham Jr. for 54. I really didn't go into the draft thinking I'd get Odell Beckham for 54. I thought I would get AJ Green for about 51 is really what I thought. And I would have liked to have had AJ Green. He ended up going for 55. And Antonio and them were all going obviously a little bit more than Odell. And so I thought, well, anytime I go into a draft, if I think I want to spend $51 on my starting wide receiver or 35 on my 30 on my running back, I'm willing to go $3 or $4 or $5 more, because I know often at the end of the draft you end up having a few bucks where you think, I wish I would have spent, and I could have had, in this case, Odell Beckham. So getting Odell really drove me to try to get Eli Manning. I just thought it'd be a good combo to pair together. So I got Eli for 2, Odell for 54. And then at my running back 1 and 2 position, I kind of was targeting 1 or 2 of Doug Martin, Eddie Lacy, and C.J. Anderson. They've been going for around $30. Anywhere from 20.
Last other draft where you waited on that tier, I thought it worked out perfect for you. You ended up getting Doug Martin, I think, for dirt cheap, $20 or something like that.
Yeah, there's a couple of them.
Awesome,
couple of them like that where I've got them. And I think this one I paid a little bit more. I paid 35. And the reason I went as high as I did on Doug, if it would have been CJ at that point or Eddie, I probably would have let him go. But some of the research I've done, and of course it's based on last year's teams pretty much, but the strength of schedule, I do kind of like to peek at that. And Doug has probably the best strength of schedule for running backs. So, I mean, you can find variations, but Tampa Bay is always going to be, according to what all the experts out there are saying, it's right there near the top. So I spent 35. I did end up getting C.J. Anderson for 24, which I thought was still a pretty good deal. I think they should run the ball a lot. Hopefully he can hold off Booker. And then to round out I got Sammy Watkins. I wanted him in another draft, and I never got him, but I paid a little more than I thought I would have to. I paid 38. But then based on those top 4 guys that I had, I was getting pretty crippled by cash. So when the time came, I ended up I couldn't spend a lot on anybody after that. The next most expensive guy I have is Michael Crabtree. I got him for 15, and he's my wide receiver 3. So I spent $9 on Delaney Walker. The Seattle defense I spent 2. Spencer Ware I spent 2. Blake Bortles, somebody threw him out for $1. I went 2 and I got him. I didn't have any intention of getting him. Jerick McKinnon 2. LeGarrette Blount 2. Michael Thomas 4, only because I'm not a big fan or anything, but I had money and there wasn't much left. Rashard Matthews 3. I did want him. It's PPR, and I'm hoping that he works out. Eli Rogers 2. Kenny Stills 2, Jordan Cameron 1. So overall, I like my starting lineup. I would have been happier with a little stronger wide receiver 3, and if Crabtree would have been my flex, that would have been fine. Or I get Spencer Ware starts week 1, he can be my flex. Blount could be, or Rashard Matthews could be. But I was not as happy with this draft because, I mean, a lot of the players I have are the same as in some of my other auctions with the running backs, and I have Sammy and some other ones, and I have, other auctions. I had a stronger wide receiver 3, I had a stronger flex, and I had a stronger bench. So I don't know what happened. I don't know how it all fell apart. I know in a lot of the other ones, though, I never spent $54 on my wide receiver one. I probably only spent, 40 or 35, and that makes a big difference too. You can definitely get a stronger wide receiver 3 or flex. So that was my take. I think it's going to be a struggle. And the worst part, like I was saying when I got done and crying, was that in a PPR league, like, I'm not worried. Like, if my two running backs would have been, say, Doug Martin and then Rashad Jennings or Melvin Gordon or somebody that cost me like under $12, I wouldn't have cared, because there's always running backs that come out of the woodwork that end up getting touches and can produce fantasy points for you. But it's really hard to get a receiver. In our league, we have 18, 17 guys drafted each, and there's not a lot out there for wide receiver. So it's really hard to find a receiver off the waiver wire that can come in and produce for you. And I'd much rather have a little more depth at receiver, and then have weaker running backs, and knowing that I could probably find one off the waiver wire at some point that could put up good starting fantasy points for me. Too late now, though.
Well, I mean, I like Rashard Matthews. I see what you're saying. I mean, I like Crabtree too. I don't think he'll be bad. I actually remember when Crabtree was nominated, and I was thinking about I wanted to get him as my wide receiver 4. Pretty sure it was my wide receiver 4. And his price just got too high for what I had left. I couldn't keep bidding, but $15 for Crabtree, that's pretty close to what he normally goes for. So
I just want to do a quick comparison before you talk about your team, Slim, just so, because people are thinking, well, it doesn't sound too bad. But here's a quick comparison. We did this ESPN auction. So in the big auction just on the weekend, I had Eli Manning and Blake Bortles, and then for $4 total. And in the ESPN, I got Carson Palmer for $5. I'd rather have Eli and Blake. But in running backs, in your auction, like I said, Doug Martin, C.J. Anderson, Jerick McKinnon, LeGarrette Blount, Spencer Ware. In the ESPN auction, Doug Martin, C.J. Anderson, Arian Foster, Charles Sims, Devontae Booker, Tevin Coleman. So that's kind of a wash. I got the handcuffs in both cases. Sims could even play the flex half the time. In the big auction that we had on the weekend, Odell Beckham, Sammy Watkins, Crabtree, Thomas, Stills, Matthews, Rogers. In the ESPN one, Demaryius Thomas, Jarvis Landry, Alan Hearns, Jordan Matthews, Michael Crabtree, Willie Snead, and Josh Gordon. That is the difference to me. I have 3 easy receivers and a flex, and I got guys that if one of the top guys go down, I have no problem with these other guys filling in. Josh Gordon versus Eli Rogers, Willie Snead versus Kenny Stills, Crabtree's a wash, Jordan Matthews over Michael Thomas. That's the big difference. And that's Kelsey and Ertz at tight end over Delaney Walker and Jordan Cameron. So it's the same auction. We had drafted one more player in ESPN. Hoshka's a kicker, Cardinals D. Same amount of money, and I love that ESPN team. What do you think?
Yeah, I like it too. I mean, the wide receivers, I think, are way better, and I think the difference, honestly, is Doug Martin's price. That, to me, is kind of one of the things, I mean, that would allow you to really deepen up if you would have got him here at the same price.
And the other one, too, was I think Odell 54, and I want to say Demaryius was 28 in the ESPN auction. So, yeah, Demaryius isn't obviously Odell, but you saved $26. That give me that huge depth at wide receiver in the ESPN auction. You can say the quarterbacks are wash, running backs are wash. Probably got an edge in tight ends in the ESPN, and a huge jump or a huge difference is receivers. So, yeah, that's kind of what I was going into our big draft thinking I was going to do again, and I let her get away.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Well, it happens. I mean, I just gotta play the waivers a little bit and whatever.
Oh yeah, and
it'll be now. So
yeah, that's right. So let's talk about your team. What you thought?
Well, I went in with a strategy of trying to go somewhat thin at running back. I'll preface this by saying I had no intention of spending big money on a tight end. That was the one thing I kind of said, no, I'm not really going to do that. Everything else was kind of up for grabs. I mean, I had a contingency of if I ended up buying a bigger name running back, like in your league when we did it a week before, I ended up with Lacey because I thought he was a decent value and whatever. I got him, so then I had plans for that. One thing I did this year, which I'd never done, and I found it very helpful, and I tracked all the prices. So when a player was nominated that wasn't a quarterback or a defense, because our league pretty much grossly undervalues quarterbacks. So the AAV on a QB just doesn't apply to our league really. And I'll probably get into that in a second because I got one of the top quarterbacks. And defense is because they're just going to go for a buck or two. So it doesn't really matter to me. So I started plotting when a player was nominated, what they should go for based on their AAV and what they actually went for. And I found out in the first 12 picks, 12 players bought that weren't a quarterback or defense, there was $62 that should have been spent that wasn't. So on players like Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham, the studs, pretty much, there was $62 that I thought should have been gone that wasn't. So what that said to me was, one, people weren't paying for the elite players, and two, that meant that at some point you were going to have to pay probably more than you want to for your wide receiver threes, your running back threes, those flex type guys, or maybe even wide receiver twos, depending. So part of me, maybe it's because I had a few, I wanted to nominate. Like, I was just praying to bring this nomination back around because I made up in my mind I was going to pay to get elite talent. I ended up, and as a little feeler, I think I had the sixth nomination. I threw out Russell Wilson when it came to me because I wanted to see what elite quarterbacks were going to do. I know that they're undervalued. I ended up buying him for $14 because I just thought it was a really good value. Now, normally I don't prescribe to that theory. I usually say, you know what, it's still a quarterback. I don't need to do it. So I was kind of pissed off at myself, to be honest, and I still am a little bit when I look back at it. Even though I like Russell Wilson, I think he's my fantasy quarterback one this year, but I just still think, oh man, I could have saved $10 somewhere, and that might come in here later. The next player I bought was Gronk. Again, I didn't nominate him, somebody else did. I got him for $38, and I had no intention of spending on a tight end, but I felt like he should have went for $50. And when I was noticing that all this money was going unspent, I thought, I need to start buying some talent now. So I went and I bought Gronk. I like owning Gronk. I think he's a good positional edge, and I thought it was a good price. So after that, I targeted Allen Robinson. I wanted to get one top receiver. I got him for $47, which was a little bit probably less than what he typically goes for, but not crazy. Then it started to get a little bit slim pickings because people like AJ Green, I was hoping to get him as a wide receiver too even. I thought maybe he would slide. And like you said, he went for, I think he might have been, other than Antonio, he might have been the second most expensive wide receiver.
Yeah, he was, I think.
You know, Keenan Allen, all these guys kind of at the bottom ends of these tiers, these kind of low-end wide receiver ones, high-end wide receiver twos, I started going for quite a bit. And, you know, Oldie, Brown, and Marshall sat there forever, and I thought, this is going to be the guy I go and get. And he still went for over $40 somewhere. So I had to kind of shift gears. So I ended up buying Doug Baldwin as my wide receiver too. I thought it was a decent stack to go with Russell Wilson. Plus, I love his upside. We talked about it in the pod before on the wide receiver special. I feel like his floor is his price right now, so anything he does above and beyond is just straight value. So I like having him, even though he's maybe not my prototypical wide receiver 2. I'd like to get him more as a wide receiver 3. And then I got Fitz for $18, which is a little more than I spent or like to spend. I got him for $11 in the pool that you run blistered the other week when we did a draft. But again, it was getting slim pickings at wideout, and I had to do whatever I could to try and build some type of a decent wide receiver core, like you talked about. I like having one. Mine's not as good as I wish it would have been, or normally is, I think. And then running backs. I mean, there were some guys I wanted to target. I know I was looking at DeMarco Murray. I thought he would go cheap. And a lot of them, they just went for slightly more than I wanted to spend. So I ended up getting Latavius Murray, for $18, which don't think is a real good value. I like. He's got a little bit of upside. I'm starting to come around on him in that Raiders offense. And then Duke Johnson, the guy that's polarizing. We talked about him on the pod a lot. I got him for $11. I like him in PPR leagues. I think there's better options that I could have got, but again, they were just going for too much money, and I didn't want to spend $15 on another running back, so went with him, thinking that I would target some guys like Theo Riddick, Charles Sims, maybe even James White. I'm trying to think who I had on here. Or Rashad Jennings later.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my starting lineup. I ended up going with Willie Snead as my flex, or my wide receiver 4, which I kind of took a page out of your book. I like to be deeper than that, but by buying Gronk, I think that was the trade-off I had to make. I couldn't have as solid of a wide receiver core as I normally like to have. So I tried to get some guys with some upside. We'll see. I like the guys that I have. I just don't necessarily like them all in the spots that they're sitting in. If I could bump them all down one spot and have spent that $38 on a wide receiver 2, probably would have felt a hell of a lot better. But that's the end of it. So my bench shaped up. I got Theo Riddick for $7, a guy that I liked getting. James White for $1, Darren Sproles for $2, Isaiah Crowell for $3. He was sitting there. I thought, why not try and just wrap up the Cleveland backfield, see if one of them emerges or one gets hurt, and I should have a pretty consistent starter for a total of $14. So I'm just kind of happy with that. And I took Bilal Powell for $4. And then I got Washington and Oakland for $1 at the end of the draft, thinking, well, I might as well just try and, again, timeshare that Oakland backfield, and if something happens to Latavius, then hopefully this guy can be my man. And the only receiver I have on my bench is actually Jermaine Kearse, so that isn't good. I'm going to have to try and hit waivers, but when I looked, there was just a ton of running backs left, and there wasn't lots at receiver. They were getting picked pretty clean, and I didn't have much to spend, so I thought, you know what, I might as well just load up on running backs, and I'm just going to pray to God that a receiver emerges or two on waivers, and I can hopefully scoop them up. Yeah. And then I took Julius Thomas for $4 as a backup tight end, just because I think my flex looked so weak in Snead.
Yeah.
I thought, you know what, I'll try and get a cheap flex, a tight end that has some tight end one that I like as a tight end one that can put up maybe some decent fantasy points, and if I have to flex him, then I can do that. So that was kind of the plan with Julius. So yeah, it was an interesting draft. I was surprised at how it went. I thought it was just going to be crazy spendy on the Adrian Petersons and the Odell Beckhams and the Todd Gurleys and all those guys, but it surprised me it wasn't really. So yeah.
You are kind of in the similar boat as myself, but that's pretty good deals with the Cleveland running back combo for like $14. I mean, that's really good. And you got your Oakland. I like DeAndre Washington down there for $1 too, and Bilal Powell. He never gets the love either, but he'll continue to produce, and he could be the number one producing running back in New York. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if that was the case. So we got a very similar situation.
Yeah, I was just hoping some of these guys just get enough touches on a weekly basis to be viable if you actually need to use them. And I'm going to have to use some of them for bye weeks for sure, but I mean, Latavius isn't he's no Iron Man, so there's a good chance some of these guys are going to need to roll out. But so other than that, any takeaways, suggestions for anybody out there, things that you would recommend people do going into their draft this weekend? Or?
You definitely have to have multiple strategies because even with Beckett's, I was looking at Beck's team just now too, and he started off with Cam Newton, but he got him for $18. I don't think he intended to get Cam Newton for $18 because Cam typically goes for a lot more than that in any draft, but that definitely would have changed the way he looked at things. So you have to go in with some flexibility, and I still think if you're going into a PPR draft, put your money into PPR. Have some, you don't like to have guys on your bench, but if you're going into a draft that takes 17 or 18 players for every team, you're going to find out that the running backs the wide receiver situation is pretty thin on the waiver wire. So it is nice to have a few, I would say, that can contribute on your bench versus hoping and praying too much off the waiver wire. And I think we both are hoping that we'll be able to pick something up off there. And you know what, maybe we'll be good for a while, and who knows what'll show up. But just history tells me and shows me that often it's easier to replace a running back than it is a receiver. So if it's a PPR draft, then try to get some guys for your bench, budget a little bit of money, and hopefully then you don't feel as nervous about things as I do right now.
See, and to that point, and this isn't I actually I don't feel completely opposite, but I actually don't feel as nervous about wide receivers. I agree that there's a lot more running backs, just numbers-wise, on waivers, but I feel like every year there's a couple guys for wideouts that will show up that will be starters without injuries to their team. Usually running backs, right? We need somebody to get hurt or something like that for them to emerge, but there's a James Jones that's going to be there. There's a Ted Ginn Jr. that's going to be there. There is an Alan Hearns that's going to be there. Trying to think of guys off Tavon Austin kind of guys, Kamar Akins. Those guys are all top 30 guys last year that probably went undrafted in a lot of leagues. So that was my thought. I thought, you know what? Say there's 8 of them at some point throughout the season. I just got to get one. If I get 2, that's awesome. But if I just got to get one when I can, and I mean, hopefully I will. And I'll be honest, I feel like if you build a deep enough roster, like this is one thing I like about going 0 RB. You can go. I like the depth that you get, so you can afford, I think, to be really aggressive on waivers for players at other positions if you need. And really, what are the other positions you need to be aggressive on? You don't really need to be a quarterback because there's going to be serviceable guys that you can get for cheap. And tight ends, I mean, say like I took Gronk. If he goes down, you can't replace that anyway. You're just going to stream and stuff. It's going to be fairly cheap. So I'm hoping if a receiver comes, I might just go all in and just say, you know what, here we go. Let's go get him and just hope that guy stays healthy now. So I figured if I can at least just worry about one position instead of more than one, that's where I can focus my energy at least. So still got to cross our fingers, right? But
oh yeah, and you never know like how many times you go into a draft and you walk away thinking that team's garbage or this team looks strong over here, and so much happens in the next 16 weeks of football that it never really unfolds the way you think it's going to unfold. So it'll always, and then even then you could be cruising along, like have an awesome team, and all it takes is one loss at the wrong time and season's over. So,
well,
anything can happen.
My pet peeve is after drafts when people are, well, let's look at these teams and rank them. Because I'll be honest, I can look at them, and a lot of them look very similar to me at the time because I just, this guy has upside, this guy has upside, this one has, it's all subjective, and it's so hard, it's impossible to predict. I mean, we've done it every year.
And I learned, you learned a lesson a while ago, years ago, where if you fill your team full of guys with upside, not all of them hit that upside. You need some guys that are solid, steady, Larry Fitzgerald, guys like that they're not as flashy, but those are the guys that you need. And then you get a few guys with upside here or there, not all in the same position, but just sprinkle a couple in because they're not all going to hit anyways. And if they don't, you can get rid of them. But you're waiting on all guys with upside. Often they don't all come together in time, and your team sucks.
Yeah, and I love what you said about the multiple budgets. I mean, I like to do that too, and I just think I can't think back to when I just used to go in with one. The first auction draft I did, like just how much that's changed. Because I've never done a draft that's gone the way you thought it was going to go, where you just said, I budgeted for this, and I got this guy for exactly this much. It was the guy that I wanted, and it just doesn't happen. Things are going to change throughout that whole draft. So the more variations you can be ready for, just the better you're going to be. And while everybody else is scrambling, and I've got all the sheets because I commissioned the league that we just did that had in their rosters, and I can tell you there are some that are clean that look like no one used them for anything. And then there are others that are, the whole side margins are scratches and crossed out dollar signs and this and that, I don't know if anybody's watching live. Here's one that just is full of numbers, and those are the guys that probably just went in there with, you know, one budget, and things didn't. One curveball got thrown at them, and all of a sudden it was scramble mode a little bit. But so be prepared as much as you can.
Well, even when I go in with a budget, I set up, you know, $7 at quarterback and $9 for a tight end and so on. And, you know, if I had 35 for RB1 and 30 for RB2 or whatever I had, I go in, and then as soon as I buy that position, then I adjust the rest of my values unless I hit it right on. If I spend less, on boom, I attach that extra money to another position that I know I want to strengthen. Or if I spend more, I start looking, okay, where can I take money away that's going to not kill my team, you know, the least impact on my team. And honestly, when I bought Odell at 54, and I spent probably $3 more than I anticipated, I can't remember where I went down and slashed it, but it was probably off my running back 2, I think. And then when I spent 35 on Doug Martin, and that was $5 more, I went and slashed it off my wide receiver 3 or my bench or wherever it was. So, and you got to keep doing that. So that kind of gives you an idea of what, as you're going along, what you're going to be able to spend. Because there's a lot of guys I really wanted, but I knew, well, if I get that one guy, it's going to screw up these last 8 players that I know I could get when I had a rough idea of who they would be at $2 and $3, you know.
And I was just going to say that. That's the beauty of tiers, right? That's why I like them. Because you can look and say, maybe there's one player, say he's in tier 4, one player left there that you really like that guy, but you know he's going to go for $10. And the tier below, there are 3 or 4 guys that you like almost as much, but you know they're going to go for $2 a piece. Well, it makes your choice a little bit easier. So when that guy gets nominated, you say, yeah, you know what? Screw it. I'm not even going for that guy, because I'm not going to just cripple the rest of my budget when I know that there's guys that are very similar in a tier down here that I like, that I know are going to go for way cheaper. And that's where you find those values. And again, it's all about being prepared and having those tiers ready and all that.
I love working off my tiers way more than just a rankings page. I love my tiers because I would look at guys and say, okay, here's how I got them ranked, and just kind of on the same idea, but on kind of the flip side, I'd look and say, okay, there's only these 2 guys left in this tier, and I don't really care for what's behind them that I'm willing to spend my money on. So now is a time where instead of saying, okay, I'm not going to spend 10 because it'll screw up the rest of my team, now is the time I'm thinking, well, I'm spending my money here because I don't think that there's any other guys that are worth more than $1 at this point anyways, or 2. So I could see, like, I didn't understand with buckets. I don't know how much money he had left over at the end, but it was a lot. And I didn't understand why he wasn't bidding on guys. Like, there was good players on the board, and else he'd stop at $9 or $10 or $12. And I think at the time he had like 50 some bucks. He had more than anybody, and he could have bought, like, he could have had a lot of depth. And you know, there's only one thing worse than spending all your money on your bench, and that's not spending your money at all. I mean, it's crap. I mean, with you. You know, and I looked at his team. Yeah,
he had $9 unused. $9 unused.
Only 9.
I mean, but he also, you know, he bought Charles Sims for 8 on his bench, and he bought Sammy Coates for 4 on his bench.
Bruce is not playing this year. Poor guy.
Tajay Sharp was $5. I mean, but you know, he went out and got his guys because he could. I'm sure, like, you know, some of those prices I think were a little bit more than I thought they would go for, but
I got a good deal on Marvin Jones at only 9. That was pretty good. So
yeah, that's right.
I don't know about that team though. I mean, I like Moncrief. That's an upside guy. Dwayne Allen. That's a starting tight end at 2. I mean, he could have took that 9, but for $11, he could have had quite a few guys. He could have had both my tight ends, I believe. Who did I have? I spent 9 on Delaney Walker and 1 on Jordan Cameron. So he could have went up. I think he could have had Kelsey.
Right. Did they sew up Walker's femoral artery? It's all good.
Yeah, that almost made me not bid on him, but I thought I gotta have him. I mean, and I was disappointed in my wide receiver 3 in my flex, so I didn't want to have, I wanted to have a guy that could potentially be a top 5 tight end if all goes like it has been going, right? So I was willing to spend on him. But yeah, that was a bad rumor. I couldn't type fast enough to try to get information about him.
I saw the next day the thread that you had going on Twitter with Dave about Walker.
Dave was good to get right on it.
Foggy at that point.
Yeah, I was very happy Dave got on it, and I felt a lot better once I drafted him. So I hope he's okay. He's still listed as questionable, I think, but I hope he's okay to play.
Oh yeah, that'll be fun. All right, well, that about wraps it up. Again, if any of you guys listening, have last-minute questions, we've been getting a lot of emails the last week and a half, which is awesome. We don't mind answering them at all. I know it's getting crunch time for a lot of drafts. So yeah, keep coming. The end is almost in sight. I know it is a good feeling. This was, I believe, my last. Oh no, I got one more here coming up. But yeah, it's feels good when you're done and you can just sit back and start getting ready to watch the actual games. So hit us up on Twitter at Fantasy Auction. You can hit Blister up on Twitter at Mr. Blister. You can hit myself up on Twitter at Slim for MVP. Yeah, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. Tweet us results, things like that. Good luck to all our buddies that are drafting right now and this weekend, and to all of our followers and listeners. Blister, you golfing tomorrow?
No, I think because the kids have hockey, we're going to do the last hockey, and then Beckett was. I think Beckett was trying to set up a draft with like his Mandy and them out in Calgary. So I don't know if we're going to do that or what's happening. Char's not excited about it. He said, I don't know anything about that. It'll be interesting. So definitely, I wanted the golf, but I think hockey is going to take over. And then it's the last day for a few weeks at least.
As it always does, right? Hockey trumps kid stuff, trumps dad stuff.
Oh, yeah. I want to fish this weekend, though, Slim. I want to get out fishing.
Well, and then we got our golf tournament the weekend after. You're golfing that, right?
Oh, I haven't even, you know what? Since we left, I haven't talked about it anymore. We were talking about it on the way home from Bemidji, and I haven't thought about it. I wouldn't mind, but if I don't mind either.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Are you golfing tomorrow?
Well, what's that?
Are you golfing tomorrow?
I'm on the fence a little bit, actually.
Yeah.
I'll go text Greg here later. He's asking. I told him I'll get back to him.
Yeah, right on. Yeah. All right, man. Well,
all right. Well, we'll talk to you later. The rest of you guys, we'll see you when it's springtime in the Rockies.